And just like in the ocean, there are waves and undercurrents. Right now, we've got really choppy waves. We're getting hit from all kinds of different directions, but there have been some significant undercurrents that have changed dramatically.
And I really want to help our audience to understand what's happening in our culture, and even as that would relate to our political decisions, even our decisions on a daily basis about where to send our kids to school, and all the stuff that's happening in culture affects us on all of these deep levels. But maybe a good place to start would be to talk about what culture even is. You're always talking about, oh, culture this and culture this. We want to be countercultural as Christians, but what does culture even mean? What does that word mean? And especially as that relates to us as Christians.
Yeah, I mean, I think culture is probably one of those words that's used the most, but defined the least. And so we just kind of use the word as if we know what it means. For Christians, I think a lot of times culture is just this kind of word for all the things we don't like, out in the world.
Right.
And we talk about the culture. And that's not strictly accurate, especially in the Western world, because you have so many subcultures along with culture. So if you say Western culture, are you talking about European or American? Are you talking about religious or non religious? Are you talking about New York or Kansas? Because none of these really are the same kind of culture. So the best way to understand culture is that culture is just whatever is normal for a group of people. And so there are Western culture norms, and there are Kansas norms, and there are Christian norms. If you've ever been to a summer camp, there's a group of people that get together for a week or 2 weeks, and there are norms. And that is because humans are unique. Made in the image of God, we were culture making, made to be culture making creatures. So it's not strictly accurate to just put all the bad stuff in the cultural bucket. Culture can either be life giving or life stealing. Culture can either be truthful or culture can be deceptive, because culture is the result of what humans do. So it's not even strictly accurate to say that culture does something. It's more accurate to say, in this cultural moment, this has become normal. And what has become normal might be good or bad. It might be genuine. It might be counterfeit. It might be, misogynistic. It might be racist. It might be, misleading. It might be deceptive. And we have to have that level of precision. Now, there are some cultural moments like ours in which the norms have changed so dramatically. One of the ways that Brett Kunkle and I talk about this in our book, A Practical Guide to Culture, is like water. So there's an old Chinese proverb that says, if you want to know what water is, don't ask the fish.
Yeah.
And the reason, yeah, I used that with a group of high schoolers a couple years ago, and I said, "Well, why wouldn't you ask the fish?" And they're like, "I don't know, because fish can't talk." And I was like, "No, that's not it. It's because fish don't know they're wet." But think about, water. If you run into, if you've ever been to the beach and you got hit by a wave, you felt it. And we're in a moment where it's very choppy waters, right? We're getting hit by wave after wave after wave. So to mix my metaphors here, it can feel like we're just playing cultural whack-a-mole, just
Mm.
smacking things on the head, especially as parents. You know, we have a college freshman in our home and a first grader.
Wow.
And yeah. There's all kinds of stories behind that. But there's a difference in the cultural waters. When Abigail was 6 and now that Hunter actually just turned 7, there's a difference in the cultural waters. We live in a really choppy moment. But you've probably had that experience too, where your kid, you went to the beach, kid ran into the water, you find them, you look down for a second to set up your towel or something like that, you look up and they're gone.
Mm.
And you have this moment of just kind of panic. And then you realize, oh, they're just 10 feet down that way or 20 yards down that way. And they didn't swim there. They didn't get, hit by a wave. They were swept there by an undercurrent. And just like in the ocean, there are waves and undercurrents. Right now, we've got really choppy waves. We're getting hit from all kinds of different directions. But there have been some significant undercurrents that have changed dramatically. You talk about one of them, this kind of skepticism that is at the heart of deconstruction. And it's not just a skepticism of Christian truth. It's really rooted in a skepticism of reality, a
Yeah.
skepticism that I can trust any authority, a skepticism of any absolute whatsoever. That is an undercurrent that has become a norm in Western culture. That's not what, all Christians have experienced in
Yeah.
their lives throughout the course of history or in other parts of the world. So, really reading those cultural waters, I think, is really important, so that you can distinguish between the issues that need to be bopped on the head with the
Mm,
whack-a-mole paddle and those that are loud but not important. And by the way, I would suggest there's a lot of stuff that's loud but not important.
mm. Well, give me an example of something that's loud but not important. That's intriguing.
Well, you brought up Twitter, which I know that you're not on Twitter because it's not even called Twitter anymore, Lisa. I don't know if
Right,
you
it's
knew that, but
X. I
it's
know,
X.
I'm so
I know, I'm
behind the
giving you a hard time.
times.
No, but I told people for years, like, if you're on Twitter, you can follow me at JB Stonestreet. If you're not on Twitter, don't start because it'll
Mm,
just corrupt your soul. So many of the Twitter controversies, pop up and the outrage machine kicks in. You think about a pastor who gets cited saying this, or you think about, and it may have been a dumb thing to say. It may have been a bad thing to say.
yeah,
But Neil Postman wrote about this about television. And he was actually talking about the history of the telegraph, that one of the impacts of the telegraph is it made people aware of something happening on the other side of the world. And being aware of something that happened on the other side of the world may not have had any impact on their lives whatsoever.
yeah,
The tempest in the Twitter teapots, which happen all the time, if you actually do the math of the number of people that are on X, the actual number of people that actually are active on X, which is 20% of the larger number or less. And then you're talking about an event that happened somewhere that has no impact on your life. You can get something that's really noisy, but that's not actually, worth being alarmed about.
mhm,
I think, another example, I think there are political examples, all the time. And I think, for example, politics matters greatly. Don't get me wrong, but we have made politics ultimate.
mm,
And the fact that and I mean, this is American culture. Politics sucks all the air out of the room. This is even different than when you and I were growing up, right? Where we talked so much more about entertainment, and entertainment and politics didn't always mix. Bill Clinton
mm.
was the first one to go on Letterman. You remember
I
that? And then
remember that with the
and
saxophone, yeah,
yeah, and then that started this whole thing of mixing pop culture and political culture, when now all political culture is pop culture and all pop culture is political culture.
mm,
And that says actually less about the specific political issues, and it says more about the health of American society.
mm,
When there's when politics is so much of our lives, you know what that means? That means church is less. That means family is less. That means local community is less. And that's the real issue, as
yeah.
opposed to the political tornado that pops up, every other day, it seems.